Hello, I'm David Vose, and I have to tell you something. Please listen. I have something very important to tell you. It should keep your interest, but it means a lot to understand this. I'm hoping that you will understand it, and by the end of this video, if you will watch it all the way through, you will have learned something very important. But I have to read you something. Hamas terrorists attacked Israel. 1,200 people died, civilians and soldiers, 30 children and babies, 244 taken hostage. Reports are unsubstantiated of much of the actions concerning Hamas brutality and Israel killing its own civilians in crossfire. 12,000 Philistines, a third of them children, have been massacred to date, and many more have been severely wounded. There are no painkillers, anesthetics, electricity, and now no hospitals to help the injured. It is the unmentionable ones that are doing the dirty tactics against the areas where the terrorists supposedly are. But it's the entire population being carpet boomed. Civilian areas full of young and old, infirm, disabled, animals, even so-called safe zones are being boomed, which the unthinkable ones has advised the Philistines to go to the towns and cities of the Gaza, and they are being leveled to the ground. The ones we are not allowed to speak of is lying about operational procedures and lying about trying not to kill the civilians. This has not all happened in a vacuum. We can see that from 1948, Israel has systematically been taking the Philistines' land, their homes, their lives, more and more each year. They have broken international law. 10,000 missiles have landed so far in the Gaza, a strip of land 25 miles long, 6 miles wide, containing 2.2 million people. Correction, there's now a little over 1 million. Oh, correction, we're down below 1 million. Correction, we got to do something fast, because the Gaza is a prison, and the landlord of the people does not allow most to leave. It doesn't allow any of them to leave. It's always treated the Philistines with contempt, inequality, and subjugated them to an apartheid, harsh conditions, intimidation, harassment. They use torture, murder, psychological warfare. Even Nathan, the messenger of Yahweh, has said, beat them and beat them again and keep beating them until they feel pain. When it comes to the Philistines, Israel is a brutal, right-wing, racist, fascist state, denounced by many Judeans and other organizations created by Judeans. About 400 rockets from the Hamas have landed in a land that is, shall we say, much holier than yours, killing a few people and injuring a relatively small number because they have an iron dome. They have missile protection. This siege of Gaza and the civilians need water, food, medicines, painkillers. They're suffering brutally now. Hospitals and fuel. They need this. They're dying. They have no machines to dig for the dead, buried under the ground by the missiles. And they have nobody to help them. These people have killed 100 United Nations workers, 50 journalists, 190 medical workers. There are reports that Israel soldiers are ooting at the medical staff, firing indiscriminately into the hospitals. And it seems that the messenger of Yahweh doesn't care about his hostages, making no deal with them, Hamas, for their release. Friends, the United Nations voted for a ceasefire. 120 votes in favor. 45 abstained, the United Kingdom, and 14 voted no, United States. Having been taught to follow Christian Zionism in the churches I attended, and out of neglect and ignorance, I never heard about the plight of the Philistines, except in the Old Testament, where when they went in, they were told by the deity of vengeance to murder them, every man, woman, and child, without having known nothing about their integrity. Who lived there first? Well, you're always hearing, well, we were here, since Abraham. Okay, but who was there before that? Abraham didn't live there. He went to Egypt. But his son Jacob, who stole the birthright from Esau and married Leah, the Yah covenant, but his favorite covenant was Rachel. And that's the promised son, Joseph, the firstborn of his favorite wife. But the other lastborn son of his hated wife was Judah. And he wrestled with Yahweh. That means he struggled in his mind whether or not he ought to worship him. He knew about El as well, that his father Abraham had received the promise, but the law, which came 430 years later, cannot make void the promise. But he didn't quite yet understand. He was afraid, and he wrestled with these laws. But you know what? Jacob won. And by morning, when the sun rose, the glimmer of the sun at dawn, came Mary Magdalene and rolled away the stone, and the resurrection occurred. I want you to understand this like you cannot or have not or would never have understood it before. He wrestled with Yahweh all night during the darkness because Yahweh is a deity of vengeance and law and death. But when the dawn came and the other covenant of El, Resh El, came over the hill, they rolled the stone away and dipped into the living waters of life that Jesus offered the Samaritan woman at the well. And Jacob married Rachel, his favorite covenant, the new covenant. And there was a well. Remember when Jesus met the woman at the well? He says, I'll give you living waters if you'd have just asked me. Well, Jacob rolled the stone and got some water for Rachel. And Moses rolled away the stone and dipped out the water for Miriam. Zipporah. Miriam meaning her priestly title, Mary, the Ethiopian. And Jesus married the woman who had the 7 demons. That covenant that had been infiltrated by Satan. And he didn't condemn her because that evil husband of her that she left, he deserved it. He had condemned her. He'd left her. He broke the covenant. He had certain responsibilities, but he forsake her. He forsook her. And he raised up the widow's son, which is that priesthood, just as Elijah did. So yes, we've heard about the Philistine. But who was there in the land? Well, they were there first. If you're going to go by who's firsty. Well, let's go back 2,000 years. You see, Jacob came into the land and, well, maybe not. We don't even know where exactly. We don't have any pictures. We know that Abraham went to Egypt and stood on the Nile. And he said, look east, west, north, and south. I'll give you all the land that your eye can see. We don't know exactly where. All these places, they've never found Solomon's temple. And I tell you that Solomon's temple is down in Luxor. So, if you go back to Moses, let's go back a little further. The Philistine was already in the land. That was the Palestinian. If we go on down further, your deity, Yahweh, I want to talk to you guys about the meaning of Yahweh. Yah, Eve. Eve is feminine. Yah is masculine. And he makes good and evil, darkness and light. The deity of vengeance. So, Yahweh, Yah, Ewe, Yahweh. Himself, Yahweh himself, condemned Israel and massacred them and took them into captivity all around the world and destroyed their city because of their insubordinates. And if you think, well, there's prophecies that says that he's going to forgive them and they're going to bring them back. Well, it doesn't mean just the Judeans. It means all of the children of Israel, east, north, west, and south, all over the world. It would be a grand day when the stick of Judah and the stick of Ephraim will be 1 in 9 hands. When the children of Joseph, who were planted like seed in all the world, are restored by the prophet Elijah. It hasn't happened yet. What's happening now, what you read in Jeremiah chapter 4, as we read the other day. The punishment that Jesus spoke when he was on the earth and said, this is what will be the sign of thy coming, O Lord. Well, you see these people, there'll be wrath upon these people. And these people, this people, shall be scattered in all the world. Not one stone will be left upon a stone. It'll be more tolerable for Sodom and for Gomorrah than it will be for these people. Though Sodom and Gomorrah was sent to everlasting destruction in flames of burning sulfur and fire as a judgment, it still would be more tolerable for Sodom and Gomorrah than it will be for these. And there shall be wrath upon this people. And Jerusalem shall be trampled on by the Gentiles for 3.5 years, until the times of the Gentiles be finished. And then you will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven. Oh, who are these, my Lord? This great multitude of every nation, every tribe, every people. There are no numbers that could even express how many. The whole world. And they were given white robes. And I saw the woman who was adorned with the sun of righteousness, and the moon of the law. She conquered and was beneath her feet. That age was over, and she was glorified in light. And she had been crowned with all of the 12 natures of astrology, which is all of the transmigratory gradations through the fish, the bird, the mammal, and the men. As the Apostle Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, about the resurrection and how we all have to go through this death. The Apostle Paul says that anyone who reads the Bible, anybody from that covenant, they read it with a veil upon their face. But when Christ comes and you recognize Jesus, the veil is removed. And we with unveiled faces, beholding behind the curtain, what are we beholding behind the curtain? The Shekinah, that's feminine, the glory. If you've ever seen the Trinity symbol, and there's the Father and the Son sitting in chairs on the left and the right, and behind them, like a shining sun, there is the light, and a dove coming out from the center, which represents our mother, the beautiful eagle dove that was there at creation, hovering. Ruach Elohim, feminine. The Phoenicians call her Isis, the Virgin Mother. For too long, we've been lied to. They took over the entire church and apostatized. What does that mean? Very few people know what this means. It doesn't mean to become sinners or stop believing in Jesus. Oh, that's a big part of it. They don't believe, never did. But that's not what it is. Apostasy means to turn back to the weak and beggarly elementary things of the law, to Judaize. And that's what Christianity has done. We've listened to these Adventists and these lawyers. And we've got to have prisons. We've got to have laws and schools and more government, socialism, and law. Law and order. That's what Trump's for. I want liberty, or give me death. I will not be a slave. But the unspeakable one said, crucify him. May his blood be upon us and our children. And so therefore, it shall be by your own words. And Jesus said, you will not receive me, though I was coming in my Father's name. But when he comes in his own name, Yahweh, the nations shall know that I am the Lord Yahweh, and I will butcher the world and murder them all, and the horse's bridle will be swimming in the blood. There will be a great sacrifice in the land of Bozrah. And Jeremiah said, I beheld, and lo, the earth was empty and void, and there was no man. The earth had been turned upside down for the wrath of deity upon their wicked evil ways. Because many had believed in them and worshiped them and said, yes, we need them. Let them live. But these poor Philistines, we need to murder them all. And then we will all get down in little curtsies and say, oh, we love you. You're the chosen. I tell you, it is exactly the opposite that the Bible is telling you to believe. Remember who was the one who had the money among the apostles? You know, because each of the apostles, there were 12, represented one of the 12 tribes of Israel. There isn't just Judah. But in Latin, when you say Judah, you say Judas. So each of them had a tribe to represent. One of them was carrying the money. And he's the one who dipped the morsel of bread into the bitter herbs and the vinegar. He was about to eat something quite bitter. But it'd be a little more bitter for the other one he was going to do it upon. And he gave him with a kiss, and with that, he betrayed him. This happened before, when the children of Israel were wondering what they're going to do with their favorite brother Joseph, who would become a multitude in the earth and would marry the Canaanite. He said, why don't we sell him to the Midianites? The Midianites were traveling by in a caravan. It was probably like the Silk Road or whatever. And there was a little town there where all the crazies came, get refreshments and drink along the highway. He said, let's sell them to the Midianites that are going down into Egypt. We'll make a profit. And they did. Although, to be fair, he did that to save Joseph's life because the other brothers wanted to murder him. You know, the flesh wants to murder the spiritual child, the truth self. The liar is blind. So he was taken down to Egypt. He would marry Asenath. Yeah, down there in Egypt. The daughter of the lineage of King On in the city of Heliopolis. Sechem, the Canaanite, their daughter Asenath. Asenath is also the name of the chief deity of Egypt. This Canaanite woman brought her lineage, and through their traditions, the woman shall bear the seed of the Messiah. The Bible tells you this in Genesis 3:15. And so, Rahab the harlot married Joseph, and they went into the promised land and had children, and those children led to the birth of Jesus Christ. Rahab was a Canaanite of the town of Jericho, and the brothel that she was supposed to have been a harlot over, that's a big lie. There's no brothel. She was in a temple with a high tower, and the tower is a particular word that has reference to this particular pagan temple that Mary Magdala, which Magdala means tower, and it's that same tower. It was at Heliopolis. Well, why would this tower be in Jericho and Heliopolis? Was there like more than one of these temples? Well, there might have been. But I'll tell you, Jericho is where the children of Israel went just as they got to the Jordan to cross over, and they put 12 stones in a circle and called it Gilgal, which means the wheel of karma, the wheel of rebirth. And by the way, earlier we are told that Abraham went down into Egypt to the city of Arba, which is Orb. And he bought a cave that the cave is some kind of strange word. Nobody understands it. It means like a vortice swirling around and around, like in the center of a hub, deep within the earth, in the depths like the abyss. He bought this deep cave. Well, we now know what it really is. It's under the Great Pyramid at Giza. It's literally the exact continental center or geographical center of the world. And everybody around the wheel of this Gilgal, or this wheel, or the 12 houses they will inhabit around the wheel, around the world, north, east, south, and west. But the hub was the Uru Salem, or the orb, Ur. The word or is light, and orb means the sun, or the orb of light. And the Mount of Horeb is the Mount of Orb, and this is the Great Pyramid at Giza. And they went down into the water, which means they went down into the wheel of rebirth and struggled, because on the bottom of the wheel for 3 days between December 25th and the spring equinox is these 3 days and nights of the Aqua and the Pisces and the Capricorn fish man that swims through, and we transmigrate during these age-long periods. The Bible talks about this in Genesis chapter 1, and many parables about this. But remember, Jericho was when they were just going into the land. Jericho may be just a mile. We don't even know. Maybe it was the same spot that the old Jerusalem was built. But the old Jerusalem was a Canaanite city, a Jebusite city, and it's called Ura Salem. Ur is light. In Egyptian, it is Ra. And so it was the city of Ra, and that is the same. The Egyptians called the city of Ra Heliopolis, because they have Helios or Helios for the sun instead of Ra. But it's the city of the sun, and we've shown evidence that that's where Jerusalem is, the city of the sun, the city of Ra, Heliopolis. And therefore, Jericho was probably either that spot, identical, or within a mile or two of that. It was not even in the area we recognize today as the land of the Philistines. You see, they were going into the promised land, and within its midst, there were these big walls that had risen with hewn stone, man-made, and corruption had ensued with the laws of men, the works of man. Where can you build me? A house of stone. I dwell in heaven and earth. So they had to rescue that woman that was in there. The soul, the consciousness was trapped in the maze of good and evil and the knowledge of good and evil. It couldn't be won through force, by might, but only by his spirit, by blowing the trumpets. And all the material came falling down and was not brought to mind. And we focused on the spiritual and saved that woman. And the spiritual, which was Issue, we call him Joshua, he married her, and the two became one. These towers have come down to us today in steeples and different things. Her red scarf or sheet or whatever was hanging out the window. You see this today where, people put out this little red light or whatever, like Roxanne, Roxanne, right? This has gotten to some caricature from all of this. Well, that's not what happened at all. That was a temple. And it had been built up with hewn stone made by man, man's laws. It had become corrupt. And the woman, or your soul, is entrapped in this world. And the laws and the wickedness. That's the promised land. There was a bunch of demons ruling over it. We don't want to kill the woman. She's going to bring forth the seed. That's your soul. She ain't evil. She's corrupt by the demons and this materialness. The walls of Jericho must come down. How? Not by force nor by might, but by my spirit, saith the Lord. And they just simply marched around these holy priests. They did nothing but sing and play the trumpet. And at the end of 7 rounds, the last trumpet, boom, it all came down. And they delivered this beautiful woman. And she was brought back in holy matrimony to the man she is supposed to be with, who represented the spiritual side in Joshua, whose name wasn't Joshua at all. Maybe in Hebrew it was Yeshu. But his name, literally, they added Yah to that in the Masoretic scribe rendition of the Bible that most people are reading. The Septuagint, which is the authorized Holy Textus Receptus by the apostles and Jesus himself, it says Isha. That was his name. The same name as our Savior. So the Philistines were there first. And then when the Judeans did build a city, they eventually divorced themselves from the woman. The Yah did, the male, from the Eva. And they made her a slave and made her subject and veiled her. That's why that little red veil was hanging out. She had taken it off. We've gone beyond that veil. You know, where the harlot's got the veil and you take it down. You know, nowadays it's become some sick kind of purchasing woman for sex. Had nothing to do with these prostitutes, these holy harlots. That's what we call marriage today. You notice that the woman has a veil. The harlot hides behind a veil. And the woman who has not yet been married hides behind a veil. You know why? Because the word harlot just means a pure woman who's not married. So when you get married, you better go find you a harlot. That means a holy woman, pure and undefiled, who dwells inside that temple, who's prepared and chaste, waiting for Ariel's gamos. It's the exact same word, kodesh, that they use when they say holy temple, holy mother, holy land, right? Holy deity. It's this word holy, sacred. And so the word harlot just means the sacred woman. And she wasn't a common prostitute. She had to carry out the great Ariel's gamos, which is a divine union between the king and the divine princess that brought forth the Messiah. And therefore, this holy prostitute was first the Virgin Mother who gave birth to Jesus. And then Jesus married the high priest's daughter, Mary Magdalene, to make the Holy Family. And they were taken to France, to Marseille, France. And from there they went to up the Rhone all the way to Paris, and they were massacred. And then they went up to the Isle of Man and over to New Francia and built Chalago as their capital. And this has been taken from your history books. Not only has that been removed, but it's also been removed that it was these same people, these Vikings, of one of the lineages of the tribe of Dan, the same people that became Genghis Khan and went all the way over to Japan and murdered and wiped out everybody from China, from sea to shining sea, and then came back, went through Moscow, took that, and then went down to Germany, Sweden, Danemark, London, up the Danube, and the Danister, and the Donetsk, the Macedonians, but there were others of the tribe of Israel, the Iberian Peninsula, and the British or the Brit Covenant-ish people, Aphrodite's seed, or the Africans. It's a long story, But the people that live in this place that we still to this day call the land of the Philistine, they came in and brutally, because their deity was the deity of vengeance, the one who fell upon that mountain the Bible talks about, the angel who fell like lightning, was thrown down to the earth with great wrath. Wrath only comes by means of law. Sin came because of the commandment, and death came by way of sin, and the wrath came after. And the deity of wrath, or the deity of vengeance, is Yahweh. And these individuals follow these carnal commandments written on their stony heart because they wouldn't look into the light of love and truth, but rather veiled it and told Moses to talk and make a priesthood. And the Aaronic priesthood became an appendage to the true holy priesthood of Ruel Jethro of Midian, going back to Melchizedek. So the lower, the physical body, because of his blindness, I am deity and there is none else. He does not see any other beside him. He's blind. He don't have the spirit. He's the carnal, conscious mind. And he's the ego, the lower ego. And he doesn't recognize the rest of the children, the Philistines. He says, kill them. I don't know who they are. How dare they not speak my name correctly? Bow down. Don't touch my mountain or I'll kill you all. Please, please, Yahweh, don't kill them all. What about your reputation? You just brought them up out of Egypt, right? And then you bring them up over here and just murder them all? You know, what are they going to think? You're nuts. You got to save some of them. All right, just kill 30,000 of them over here, but we're going to save some of them, the ones that are scared and shiver and are in fear of my name. You worm, Jacob, my servant. Oh, how I loved to crush thee. Isaiah chapter 53. I'll not pardon you for any of your sins. Under the third and to the fourth generation, you'll by no means, I swore in my wrath, will you ever enter into my rest. But you will work 6 days and be a slave. Remember yesterday I said I wanted to answer a question that I had gotten about James 4:11. I think in verse 12 as well, but it says, James 4:11, brothers and sisters, do not slander one another. Anyone who speaks against a brother or sister or judges them speaks against the law and judges it. When you judge the law, you're not keeping it, but sitting in judgment on it. So you can see the problems this has caused some individuals who, when they hear my videos, they say we're not under any law, and Paul says we're under no law whatsoever. Only but grace do we attain. They say, yeah, but James says, you got to have works, but he's talking about the works of Abraham, which was the works of faith. And then he says, here's the works: to love one another, to help those that are needy, clothe the naked, and feed the hungry. And you see your brother suffering and you don't help them. So you can't just say, I'm saved without works, but not works of law, but the works of charity. So here again, we have another one that at first glance doesn't make sense. Is he saying that we should keep the law? No. Now think about this. If we speak against a brother or a sister, or we judge them, we speak against the law. We judge it. What does it mean we judge the law? In other words, that word judge is crisis. We have the word crisis today, and so decision comes from crisis. And it just means to decide, where we get the word decision. It means we're deciding. And even the word law there doesn't necessarily mean Torah, but just common law. But I do think he's speaking of law altogether, including the Torah. But specifically the Torah, because he's talking to Ebionites and people in an area around Jerusalem that are trying to understand this law thing. Paul had a lot of trouble explaining it to people as well. So James is speaking to people who believe in the law, and that's why they're judging people, because the law says this is wrong and that's wrong, and so they're using or deciding law. They're taken to court to judge one another. James is saying, I don't want you to judge people. In other words, forget the law. I don't want you to use the law to decide by law, because you're keeping the law. I don't want you to do that. That means you're judging. He says, anyone who judges his brother or sister. But I don't want you to do that because you're keeping law when you judge people that way. And we don't keep the law around here. We're Christians. We're under grace. That's what he's talking about, friends. And I don't want to go into it in depth. It's just one verse. You can look it up yourself in an interlinear and look at the Greek and try to understand that if one is deciding someone, whether they're good or bad, they're using law. And you can't decide if somebody's good or bad without using the law. Otherwise, it's your own opinions. And we don't make stuff up on our own and judge people. And we don't use the law because we're not under it. So therefore, we shouldn't judge anybody. That's what he's saying, friends. Now, and the first commandment is you will get down and worship me and grovel while you do it, or I will kill you. The second commandment is much like it. You will get down and worship me, or I will kill you. And the third commandment is similar to the first two. You must worship me and no other, or I will kill you. The fourth commandment, you will be a servant, a slave. 6 days, meaning the entire earthly existence. The Sabbath is the time for rest, friends. When you are no longer under law. Everything's released and you're free. Jesus came preaching liberty. We ain't got to the Sabbath. That's the millennial. So we're all under slavery now. Paul says, ye who want to be under the law. Have you not read the law? It is slavery. You want to be under this law? Touch not, taste not, handle not, which is all going to be used as life goes on, and flush down the toilet. Don't worry about what's on the outside of the cup. Make sure the inside's good. Be a good person. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Go and read that verse and come back and tell me what it means, Jesus said. I desire mercy. Well, Jesus, should we forgive them like more than once or like 2 or 3 times or forever? Forgive them 70 times 7, which means over and over again in cycles until it's finished. And it's completely forgiven because 10 represents the physical, spatial, material, and 7 represents time, as in cycles like weeks. So you keep doing it however long it takes, and you do it completely, 70 times 7. And forever. But the world today has been taught lies. You've been taught to go back to this worship and go back under the law. Aleister Crowley made a temple, the Eastern Temple Ordi, or ordination, into this supposed temple that, from what authority did they have to give anyone any ordination? They certainly weren't Christian. Is Satan giving out ordinations now? Well, he said he was the beast of Revelation. He said he'd come up out of the bottomless pit. How did that happen? Well, they had a seance. And the devil came up and they said, we want to take over the world. We want money. We want power. We worship you, Satan. That's what they told him. And Satan said, okay, well then you worship me, and I want you to give me babies, and I want you to do all these evil, wicked things, and sell me your soul, and I will give you power for an hour. And Aleister Crowley had several students. One of his students created NASA, and I'm not making this up, friends. Directly, this is Project Paperclip, Parsons, the space agencies. Elon Musk's uncle, or great uncle, was Werner von Braun, who was head of the space agencies over there. And we won't say from where. This is a children's program. You can't say that on public television. One of his students was Anton LaVey, who created the Church of Satan. Of course, there is no Church of Satan. Satan doesn't exist. He's the opposite of reality. He's non-reality. He's the illusion. He's the liar. They just look at some cartoon that we had here in the last 50 years that says Satan's got a red horns and a black cape. So he puts on a costume from Halloween and declares he's the grand poobah of the devil. And who goes out and listens to him? Not too many, except for people like Marilyn Monroe, Doris Day, all the movie stars. And he sponsored the whole, with his financing, by the bankers, because this is their goal. He financed the whole music industry, rock and roll, and throwing up the Satan signs and getting the children to put tattoos. How dare you not like tattoos, Dave? Well, I'm just telling you the truth, whether you like it or not. To disrespect your body, your parents. And, okay, so they did pot. Well, that was good. But when they were under these herbs, they needed guidance. But instead, they were influenced by sex and power to ascend unto demons and become evil and create evil. Not all of them did, of course. The devil couldn't capture all the souls, but the devil was trying. And he made it cool to beat your guitar into smithereens on stage and have blood running down your face and look like a fish. I always wondered why the number one band in the world, the guy looked like a blowfish, and I couldn't figure it out. He was skinnier, and he was on some kind of drugs, and everybody's, he's so wonderful. I thought, what, the guy is ugly. I have never, to this day, ever remember any song from that group that I ever thought was a good song. I bet none of you could tell me or give me any of their songs. They were only popular because the world kept promoting it. And guess who was promoting all this rock and roll, along with Anton LaVey? Well, a guy that was married to another girl that was a famous movie star. I'm not trying to think of her name. Something Manson or something. Marilyn? No, it wasn't that. Anyway, the lady that, the other Manson, the hobo that they blamed all this on. They had this satanic cult down there. The same Bavarian that was down there. He had already signed the Beatles, the Beach Boys, the Mamas and the Papas, and a bunch of others that I don't remember, all these big bands. They were promoting California, by the way. Son, tell your daddy takes a T-bird. It's all go to California, California. And surfing, and it was just promote California, Hollywood, propaganda, take the children, rock and roll, throw up the devil sign. We don't care about authority. And all we want to have is sex. It's all that matters. It wasn't about spirituality, my friends. It wasn't about true liberality. It was about liberalism, which means the rejection of the divine being. That's what it all was. So those are only two of his students. But Aleister Crowley also had, in this place called Pasadena, California, is where this temple was. In that little organization he had, there was another man called L. Ron Hubbard, who created Scientology. And though he's not a huge religion, I mean, it's kind of a religion for the elite and for a lot of people like Tom Cruise and these big wigs and movie stars. And it gives them power. It's like an insurance group, a club, and you get certain favors. And that way they can't tax you because they hire big lawyers for you, but you pay them off. Like this Berg guy on television is doing all the Dr. Berg, his information's probably pretty good compared to anything else. But he pays a lot of money to Scientology so that they don't sue him and so that nobody bothers him. He doesn't have to pay a lot of taxes, and he makes a lot of money. He gives the Scientology church millions. You can almost imagine how much he makes off of his pill company. And yeah, I'm not saying he's not sincere, but I don't think he thinks that Scientology is a real church. I think they use it as a club. To me, it's about greed. It's about money. I don't know what they plan on doing with their money. And I hope they find happiness. But what I really hope is that you guys understand that if you can not see what's going on here, then you're probably blind. And if you're blind, you're blinded by the God of this world. That the light of the gospel might not shine through. So you've been taught Zionism. Yeah, you get what I'm saying. And how important these chosen ones are. And how we've all got to give all of our money and have an endless war with the world. And we need to keep those poor little souls over there in some kind of apartheid prison and pretend it's all right. By the way, we got to go kill a bunch of people in Iraq too along the way because we're making an army called ISIS. And they're going to go in and we're going to let them come into the open borders of Europe and in the United States. And then when we're getting ready to bring it all down, our sleeper cells will awaken and we'll pay them very well. But right now, it starts with this dealy-bob with Hamas and the Philistines. Or the people who are occupying Philistines' land. They have a mandate. It's something like 3,500 years old. That says they can go in and murder everybody. So therefore, we should let them. Let's just read it carefully and not misunderstand the mandate that they have. To genocide them. And treat them as inferior dogs. Ye who want to be under the law. Have you not read the law? It's about slavery and murder. Your father's a liar and a murderer. He did not stand in the truth from the beginning. What beginning? Well, should a man and a woman get a divorce? Moses said we could get a divorce. Jesus said, well, it wasn't that way from the beginning. My heavenly Father Elohim, who is above Yahweh, who made the world without a tree of the knowledge of good and evil and any temptation or any death. Not making it in some carnal form from the dust and the elements of the earth, but in its pure light body form of eternal felicity and beauty, and glory and radiance and happiness. That deity, my Father and my Divine Mother, they created the world perfect and forever, and they didn't have any wrath or anger. And they made man as his own, as the divine being's form to dwell in. And they incarnated. And the divine being emptied himself and entered into the form of a man, in the likeness of a slave. Why is he in the likeness of a slave? Why does Paul say he's in the likeness of a slave? Because all men are slaves, because we're all baptized into Moses. Yes, ye Corinthians, You were baptized. You were all there and baptized into the Red Sea with Moses, where all the children of Israel had gone east, west, north, and south. And one of the places they went was to the Greeks. Yes, Peter went to Babylon, and Thomas went to India, and Philip went to Africa. And each of the 12 tribes went to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. But Paul went to the Gentiles, which is the children of Japheth, who got the Isles of the Sea. And one day I'll explain to you what that means. There's 3 promises then. The Gentiles, or Japheth. And then there's Ham and Shem. Well, they get the same promise because Canaan is the woman, and the patriarchal side, or the carnal, and the laws went through Judea. So the Judeans were there, and they were murdering. That represents the flesh, the ego. And the higher spiritual Melchizedek priesthood that Jesus was of, the pagan Joseph, who went down into Egypt and married the Canaanite daughter. Joshua, Judah also, who married the Canaanite Tamar, and all the others. And Mary Magdalene, the pagan woman that Jesus married, the harlot, the prostitute of the tower, in order to form a bond and a wedding between these 2 sons. And so it says, enlarge Japheth's house and let him dwell in the tents of Shem. So now Shem and Ham get a blessing together, and that is going to dwell in the expanded and larger house of Japheth. All of the children are going to be saved. So all 3 of them are getting the promise, because Judah, a woman from the line of Judah, got married to a man from the line of Dan. They had a child named Samson. The Greeks call him Hercules. And so now we've got Dan's tribe represented, Judah's tribe, Levi's tribe, and Joseph. And Joseph, we're all going to be saved in Joseph. Every nation, tribe, tongue, he got the blessing. But they've got to have a wedding. That's what this is all about. The Canaanites got to get back. And when the Gentiles become, then all Israel shall be saved, according to the Apostle Paul. For blindness has happened in part to Israel, that all Israel might be saved. There's coming a restoration when the veil shall come off. And we're about there. It's going to be an apocalypse, a revelation. So our Heavenly Father made free men and free people. Not mortals, but immortal beings. He did not want sacrifice. He did not want death. He wanted only to love. And Jesus said it wasn't that way from the beginning. Where he made Adam, male and female, made he them. And they were one. For Moses, in his hardness of heart, gave you this law to divorce your wives. But from the beginning it was not so. For what deity, the Most High, has yoked together, in Genesis chapter 1, male and female made he them. Let no man put apart. If Moses is a man, and he made a law, and gave you the law that says you can get a divorce, he's wrong. The beginning is before Genesis chapter 2, before Yahweh made us in this form. It is in that place called paradise. That's the beginning. Before sin ever entered into the world. And Adam and Eve were innocent. And there was no sin. There was no shame or guilt upon the sanctuary. Nothing can harm or get in that's evil into the inside. Guard it with your life. But the outside is not so important. It's a classroom leading to Christ. That's what the law is. And they just came in. Judah had the scepter. until he who comes who has the legal right to the scepter is Joseph. For he saw 12 stalks of grain, and 11 of them were bowing down to his staff. And that represents the coming of Jesus. And so all of the world will recognize Jesus, which is not the flesh body or the material world, but the spiritual, the only begotten son of Jacob's favorite wife, Ra'el, the covenant of El Elyon that met Melchizedek, and telling Melchizedek to go to Abraham and giving him communion, meaning we're all right. We're having communion. The Lord and you and me and everybody will have communion with the Father and with the Son. Yeah. And the Divine Mother will be with us. The Holy Spirit will teach us all things. We'll have communion. Melchizedek didn't say, oh, El Elyon wants you to kill some animals and kill your own son. Yahweh came and said, kill your own son, Isaac. Prove to me. Your kid's my kid. Kill him right now on the altar and all your firstborn. And he went out and got some cows and butchered them and some sheep and some birds and everything and ripped them all in shreds and made this big old huge sacrifice and murder and blood. And Yahweh said, all right, great. I'll make your seed like the sands of the sea. Wait a minute. El Elyon said he'd make my seed like the stars of heaven. I'll take that. Well, he's going to get both. Because the sands of the sea have been raised up onto the shores of the sea. And the beast saw this. And he started coming up out of the sea to the beach, to the sands of the sea. And what did he do? He went into the wilderness to try and get the woman. But the earth came to the woman's help. And that woman is the child of Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene. And they are going to have the promise of the multitude that no man can number. And so the promise was to all the nations. But the law was given by Moses and is done away. I'll tell you who owns that land. The people who owns that land is Jesus Christ and his wife and his children, who is all of us. We are the heirs, and will reign upon the earth with Christ for 1,000 years, 144,000 who will sit upon thrones. So the Philistine is the one that is oppressed, and Israel is the powerful oppressor. And in 1948, Britain gave the Philistines to the oppressor as though it was but a trifle. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and go, guys. I hope you have a wonderful evening. I hope this video doesn't get taken down or cause me to get a strike or something. But I love you all. May the Lord bless you and keep you and prosper your soul. Stay safe, and we'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one.